You're listening to Sarah Hagan Backstage, with interviews and insights from years inside the music industry. Join Sarah as she talks with masters of their crafts, finding out what makes them tick both inside and outside of the music business. This week, Sarah talks with Matt Cameron.
Welcome to Sarah Hagan Backstage. My guest today, Matt Cameron, is not only the drummer in two of the most iconic bands, Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, but he is just an incredible drummer in his own right and has multiple projects happening. I cannot wait to catch up with Matt about what he's been up to, all of these current projects, and what he has planned for the future. So come along with me as I catch up with Matt Cameron. Matt Cameron, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Sarah. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
My pleasure. Well, I'm doing good. I'm just plugging along as usual. But yeah, everything seems to be getting back to normal, and that's all that matters.
Yes, I agree with you. And speaking of that, this past year, I've been talking a lot on these podcasts about how the quarantine has been for everyone and, how everyone's made it through. I've been keeping up with you, of course, on social media and all of that. And you have been doing so many things through quarantine, which I just love, like keeping really busy.
Yeah, I've certainly been trying to. I've been, it's like when it first started, I had 2020 was booked. Pearl Jam had a tour booked. We were rehearsing, January, February, and then we had to just kind of pull the plug on everything. So once that happened, it just the shock of everything sort of settled in for my family and myself and everything. But I kind of had a daily routine that I stuck to, and a lot of that was writing music and just practicing and things like that. So that led to some remote recording projects and some collaborations with people. So I think musicians in this day and age are able to still connect through all the awesome technology that we have. So I did stay fairly busy, which was fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's been a theme of the past year, has been, kind of just adjusting and being able to just take some time to maybe do some things, work on some things that you hadn't had time for before. Right. And
that's right.
And connect with people. And it's interesting how, of course, we're all, we were quarantined and we were all in our homes and all of that, but like the connection was still there, even more so for some people, with a little bit of extra time on our hands. And of course, technology being what it is nowadays. So I think a lot of people took the opportunity to really make those connections that maybe wouldn't have happened. And I'm grateful for some of the music that's come out of that maybe wouldn't have. And for you, actually, some of the things that I saw you doing the collaboration with Taylor Hawkins in particular. That was super cool. And
thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Well, Taylor and I have been, kind of sending demos back and forth to each other for a couple years now. Mm-hmm. We talk on the phone quite a bit. He's one of my best friends. And I think we have a lot in common. We're both drummers who like to write songs and sing and all that kind of fun stuff. So we had some time on our hands, so we figured we would just put out a single and continue to write music together. One great thing about Taylor is he writes a ton of music, and he has a bunch of different little side projects that he's that he's a part of. So luckily he could, he could squeeze me into his schedule.
Yeah.
But like, let's see, 2019, kind of mid 2019, I traveled down to LA to work with the Melvins on some material that I was writing. And then I also worked with Taylor with some of that material. So yeah, we've got like a whole, we actually wrote a whole bunch of material that, we'll be able to put out, some more of, but, yeah, I mean, Taylor's got a really cool little home studio. So
Right.
yeah, so we got to just, we just got to hang out and play music together, and just it was a really good hang. So I hope to do more of it, but I think he's gonna be a little busy at this year and next year, much
Right.
like myself.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm grateful that you guys had that time to get that project going. And for anyone who's listening, we're talking about Nighttime Boogie Association, and
Yeah.
you can look it up. The music is so good.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. So anyone listening, check that out. Look it up,
Yeah.
and I'll post a link in the YouTube description as well. So
yeah, it's kind of it's a good sort of example of like what happens when drummers write songs, like when drummers who can play guitar and all the basic rock instruments. So it's it's there's that, but that's I think we try to think of ourselves as musicians first, and and then we like to incorporate all of the different elements of our style. So yeah, that was really fun, and I certainly hope to do more of it.
And maybe that's why I love it so much, because it's like we're drummers who write music, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of us out there, but sometimes it's hard for us to like contribute to our bands and have it sort of fit the style of the band. So it's always nice for us to have outlets like that. And I've been writing songs for years. I mean, ever since I was a teenager, I'd write. I've always played guitar and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, luckily, I've been able to incorporate that into some of the bands I've played in. But it's always nice to do things outside of the big rock bands as well.
For sure, yeah, and that's true too. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, you've contributed music to the bands that you play with,
Right.
writing music and being part of that process too.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and through the years. And let's actually go back a little bit, because we're talking about
Let's do it.
singing, and we're talking about other instruments. When you started your musical journey as a kid, were drums your first instrument?
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. I kind of had a natural ability, I think, to play when I was pretty young. But I was also interested in motocross and surfing, and just kind of doing other things as well that weren't necessarily about music or drumming. But I kind of started like taking lessons. My dad got me lessons when I was about nine or 10. Because I was just beating on the couch, and I was just, beating on pots and pans and everything. So he bought me a little practice pad and got me some lessons. And then I kind of just, I didn't really take it seriously until I hit around age 14 or 15, when I started playing in bands and like neighborhood bands and things like that. So and then I took lessons again at age 17 with an excellent drum teacher in San Diego named John Santo. And that's kind of where everything sort of kind of came into focus for me. It's like I was able to make progress with these different lessons that I was given. So once I felt like I was able to kind of like channel all these different elements, that's when it came together to me for at age like 17 or 18. And I was writing songs at that time and playing guitar around that time as well. So, but yeah, I mean, I've definitely been doing it a long time, and yeah.
And I read a story once, and you'll have to remind me, but you were in like a Kiss. Was it a Kiss? It was a really funny
Are we
story,
really
right?
going to go there, Sarah?
It was so good though. The story is so
Yeah,
good
it's good.
about this. Yes. Can you tell us the story,
Sure.
please?
We call this a skeleton in the closet. Yeah. Well, I grew up with all these kids in my neighborhood in San Diego who loved Kiss. We actually, we just worshipped them. So
Mhm.
we started a Kiss cover band, and we played my sister's high school talent show. I was in like seventh or eighth grade or something. And so yeah, we just started like, we built all these like plywood sets, like these platforms, these rickety old like 2x4,
Mhm.
stage sets. And then we made flash pots out of coffee cans and light sockets. So it was a pretty dangerous stage set
Right.
that we built. My mom made a couple of the costumes.
Wow.
So yeah, we were fully into it, but we were playing kind of, high school gymnasium gigs by the
Mhm.
time I was like 15 and 16.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and there's some photos floating around. I'm going to try to scrub all those from the internet if I can. I doubt I can do that. I'll have to have Emily help me on that.
Right.
But yeah, but I think that kind of led to me playing in other cover bands, and just, I kind of, I enjoyed the experience of playing in front of an audience, but
I
yeah.
love that though. And it's something I think you should embrace, because like how great is that you guys had that level of, creativity to make your sets and the lights, and just kind of like
Yeah.
get really into it. And I have to say that I also played a high school talent show when I was
Okay.
in high school, cover in a cover band, and
Nice.
of course, had to cover some Pearl Jam, and
Cool.
like, so I don't think we didn't have the elaborate setup though,
Yeah. Oh,
but
that's awesome. That's awesome.
you play what you love, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Totally.
yeah, that's
Well,
amazing.
I saw those guys, and I saw Kiss in like 77. I think it was my second concert I went to. The first concert I went to was David Bowie, Station to Station tour.
Wow.
And that just blew my mind. I got to see like Bowie, Queen, Kiss, just all these like amazing 70s arena rock bands back in the day. So yeah, I think those experiences, for me, attending those iconic, bands
Mm.
and concerts was made a huge impression on me. I did never think, oh, I'm gonna be up there someday, but
Yeah.
it made me want to just play music, perform, be in front of an audience,
Mhm.
all that fun stuff.
Absolutely. And another thing I thought was interesting is that, you loved Kiss and those bands that you just mentioned, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. But like, you also have like a love for jazz, right? And jazz
Yeah. Yeah,
drummer.
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad took me to see Buddy Rich when I was about 15 or 16.
Wow.
And that was mind blowing as well. He also took me to see Count Basie a couple times.
Wow.
And the drummer was named Butch Miles, I think his name
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
And actually, my dad just forged his way backstage after this concert, and I got to just like talk to this drummer, Butch Miles, just kind of said hello, and he was really just encouraging, and he asked me if I played and whatnot. But seeing kind of the cream of the crop, big bands like that, it's like Count Basie,
Mhm.
it was just as powerful as seeing David Bowie, as far as like just being a young impressionable kid.
Mhm.
But I grew up with all the FM 70s rock groups of the time. you know, Blue Oyster Cult, Foreigner, you know, etc. On down the line.
Yeah.
And then like as soon as when I was around 18 or 17 or 18, I heard Giant Steps by Coltrane. And that kind of it took me on a different direction. And then I started listening to, you know, Tony Williams and Elvin Jones, Art Blakey, all these incredible drummers. So I kind of veered off into like just loving jazz music. You know, I didn't ever think I would, you know, pursue it as a performer and a player, but I always kind of had that in my DNA. I always like really appreciated just the purity of the music, especially from, you know, the greats, like, you know, Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk, and just like, you know, the music is just it's almost like this sort of spiritual sort of thing that just hit me really hard when I was young. And I think, you know, I kind of stopped. I had this weird idea of like, you know, someday I'm going to be a jazz musician. I'm going to be a jazz drummer. And I did try that a little bit when I was, you know, 18, 19, but the rock world just pulled me right in.
Right. I get it.
Happily. But yeah, I still love that music to this day.
Yeah. And I think, you know, what you're touching on is like whatever the genre of music, the drumming in it, you know, you mentioned all those amazing drummers, whatever genre they're playing for, the drummers are just incredible. And I also feel that like, I didn't really discover jazz music until I was like maybe early teens. And, you know, because I grew up with the 70s rock music. You kind of, you know, you hear what your parents play. That's right. And so I didn't really discover jazz music until a little bit later in drumming. And for me, it was like the same feeling, like that same feeling that I had when I heard John Bonham play. Is that feeling that I had hearing Tony Williams, right?
Yeah,
and just,
exactly.
That, you know,
it's that purity. It's like that purity of sound, the purity of intent, just the artistry of the playing. It's kind of the same thing, you know. It's like of course Bonham was a huge just lightning bolt in my life when I first heard Zeppelin 4 was the first one I heard. You know, like one of the neighborhood kids had Zeppelin records and Jimi Hendrix records and stuff like that. So Jethro Tull. So yeah, man, it was the same kind of like just it was the same kind of feeling of when I heard, you know, John Coltrane. For sure.
Yeah, I get it. Absolutely. You know, I'm just thinking back to my experience as well, and like being in my parents' minivan, you know, with like cassette tapes and playing, you know, Jimi Hendrix, but also when I grew up, when I was kind of in my formative time, you know, understanding music. And kind of like discovering how I would take a path as a musician myself. Pearl Jam, Soundgarden. This was the time that was like the time of that music. And so for me, like that music, your music is so important to my path as well. So thank you for that. I just have to recognize that. So
cool.
Appreciate that.
Oh man. I love hearing that.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. And again, you know, being you know, a small town kid and kind of like figuring out what I loved, what music I loved. That was it was such a journey. And it also was a time period where music was changing. Like what you heard on the radio was changing. And you know, it was going from that the 80s, you know, kind of glam rock into the you know, grunge phase of radio music, and you guys were such a part of that.
Yeah, well, you know, at that time, when I first joined Soundgarden in '86, at that time there was a pretty well established underground rock movement. There was independent labels, there was college radio, there was clubs to play, there were promoters and we had nothing to do with the established kind of major label machinery that was sort of the industry standard.
Right.
So when I first joined those guys, our goals were basically to stay independent and to make sure that we had had just control of how we wrote our music, how we recorded it, how we produced it, packaging, everything. And we weren't the only band to do that. I mean, there was a huge underground movement of it was, I guess it's like the DIY generation. Like we were all kind of just making it up as we went along, playing all these shows, making these records. So I felt like there was sort of this groundswell. There was this youth movement that wasn't really understood or tapped into by the by the established record industry. And so once all these bands started to become recognized by and get major label deals and everything, and once we kind of like took over the airwaves and we took over like just this youth culture thing that was happening, it was pretty mind-blowing. But it sort of happened in the 80s, like in the early to mid 80s. And another aspect of it all is that it wasn't just kind of the rock, the alternative rock bands. There was like this incredible R&B and rap and hip hop thing that was happening in the late 80s and 90s too. Like, we loved NWA.
Yes.
We loved Public Enemy. And then, there were some shows that Soundgarden got to play with, with Ice-T's Body Count, and we played some shows with like Wu-Tang and all these like just artists that you wouldn't think would gel together, but it was just like we were all sort of like coming up at the same time, and I think the reason that it resonated so much with the audience is it because it was sort of an honest representation of all of us, of this whole movement. Like we were all writing what we felt and what we knew about. There wasn't any there wasn't anyone telling us, oh, you have to write a song to get on the radio, you got to do this, you got to do that. Like we were just sort of just trying to be real true to ourselves and sort of making it up as we went along. And like I was saying before, there was kind of a network set up to where we could actually go tour and we could make records and we could get on the radio. It just wasn't like, it wasn't, top 40. It wasn't, arenas,
right,
etc. But we were okay with that, or I was okay with that.
Right.
The goals were modest, but the most important thing was just kind of staying true to the music. And so yeah, it's like it was a really interesting time for music and kind of youth culture in general. That one of the there's so many good moments, but I remember Soundgarden was on tour 91, 92, and Nevermind eclipsed Michael Jackson on top of the charts. And so when stuff like that happens organically, it's kind of rare. It's
right.
So
yeah, and I think that that authenticity that you were portraying, because that's what you had. You didn't have, like you mentioned, you didn't have a list of things that you had to write about, or that, goals that you had to meet, or the song length had to be this long. Like that wasn't a thing for you. And that's amazing, because what came out of it is the most authentic music that could have come out of it. And I think that resonated with this the youth who were looking for something like that, who wanted something different, who wanted something that felt like how they were feeling inside.
I think we were all sort of looking for connection back then, pre-internet and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, and our scene here in Seattle was really small. It was really, everyone knew each other. We were all kind of supporting each other. But then there was also really cool music scenes, like, all over the place, in the States and in Western Europe, that we were able to just kind of plug right into. So, it seems I've always been, attracted to kind of music scenes, like, these little clusters of like bands or musicians or artists that kind of come out of this place that you'd never envision. Like, in the early 90s, there was like so many cool bands coming out of like Manchester, like the Smiths and Stone Roses and, the Laws. Like the Laws are one of my favorite all-time bands. And they were part of this kind of 90s, youth movement culture that was happening. And like, we didn't really know, we weren't really like, we didn't really know each other per se, but maybe it was just that there was just something that was happening at that time that allowed all these bands to rise up. But I also think, like I was saying before, there was a pretty huge like underground, youth. There was like this youth movement going on that didn't want to listen to like, Motley Crue or kind of the hair metal kind of stuff. Like they were looking for something that sort of represented. Represented something different. One really cool goal for Soundgarden back in the day is we were really excited to get on the SST label because we loved Black Flag and we loved Dinosaur Jr. and the Meat Puppets and all that kind of stuff. So when we got on SST, that was like getting the gold ring for record labels. But and that led to the amazing A&M record company that we had the pleasure to work with as well. So so it was just like, I don't know, it just seemed to move naturally. Like we didn't try to force anything that didn't feel natural, and I think that's how a lot of the groups were thinking back then. Of course, it's a little different now, but I think there's still a lot of really amazing stuff coming out now. But it's just it might be a little harder to like just to get noticed, I guess, just because there's so much more music and artists and bands and stuff.
Yes,
now,
absolutely.
Like back then, it's like it didn't seem like there were as many. So maybe that has something to do with the technology. Like it's so easy and fun to record on your laptop and put it on social media or put it on SoundCloud and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah, like
exactly. That's what I was thinking. Like, social media. Maybe there was all this music back then, but like social media and SoundCloud, and YouTube, didn't exist, so it was harder to get out there. But I think that the authentic music that you're talking about and the style of playing where you're just or the style of creating where you're creating from what is inside and not from what someone else is telling you. It exists, but I think it's harder to find. Like it's harder to sort through and like figure out where that is at.
Yeah, well, my kids have been really great, pointing me down the right path, to hear some really amazing new stuff that's kind of hits me the same way as like, hearing some of the bands I mentioned before. So luckily I have some help in that department.
I love that. Absolutely. That's so important,
Yeah.
And you're speaking of your kids too, your son is making music now.
He
right?
is. Yeah. Speaking of SoundCloud and all that fun stuff, Bandcamp. He's got a little acoustic thing he's doing, and he's a fantastic guitarist. He's played jazz guitar in high school. He was he was in a really excellent high school jazz program here in where we live in Seattle.
That's great.
So yeah, I mean, and he's an engineer, recording engineer, and so he's just plugging himself right into it, and I'm really proud of him.
That's amazing. I really feel like kids nowadays, like they have this and like I don't know what it is, but an affinity or an ability to kind of pick up things like that. As far as like the technology behind things goes,
it's amazing.
You know, it really is, and like they all know how to do everything themselves.
Yeah,
figure it out and like make it happen, and a lot of really great music coming up out of young musicians nowadays.
It's amazing. Yeah. There's just so much. It's like like my daughter's really great at the technology. My son's really good at it, and they're starting to learn all this stuff at 17, 18. So back when I was that age, we had friggin', I don't know, we had a cassette deck, and I mean, one of the pieces of gear that was kind of a game changer for me when I was when I first moved up here, and when I was like in my early 20s, was a 4-track cassette recorder. I had a Foss X250, and so that was huge for me and for my fellow musicians at the time that had 4-track cassette machines. So
it's
that
amazing, right? And you I think often about how far technology has come in such a short amount of time, and how much we can all do on our own nowadays. That like our life hack was the pencil and the cassette tape to rewind it so you didn't waste the battery.
I've done that.
Right? Like it was a thing.
My son's really into cassettes for some reason.
Oh, I love that.
There's cassette only labels. Like there's this one in Portland. So yeah, I showed him that hack of like, okay, if your tape gets wound up inside the cassette, you get a pencil or a pen and you just wind it up. It's like, whoa, thanks, Dad. My pleasure.
Right. He's giving you the new music tips, and you've got the 80s life hacks right there. And speaking of the new music, as far as drummers nowadays, I love, I see that you are friends with some of the up and coming drummers who are out there right now making a name for themselves, and the more established drummers, but like that you're in that drumming community. And I think of Taylor as someone else like that. I remember meeting Taylor Hawkins and being surprised by how into the drumming community he was, like knowing everyone and all the gear and all that stuff. So I see, I saw a picture of you recently collaborating with Mark Juliana.
Oh, Mark.
And
oh my God.
It was amazing.
Yeah. Well, I heard, I grew up a huge Bowie fan, and I was a huge fan of Dennis Davis, his drummer from the 70s that did, all of his, post Woody Woodmansey period. He started, I think Dennis Davis started on the Young Americans album. So after I heard Fame, I was just like, who is this drummer? So I've always been tuned into Bowie's bands. I heard Black Star in, I think it was 2016 when it came out. I
think so.
Or 15. And I was just like, who's this drummer? Who's this guy? So I was just like amazed at the just the drum beat in Black Star, and just the sound of everything, and how it all just was like so beautifully different. And but it also sounded like a Bowie album. So I contacted him on Facebook, I think it was, or Instagram or something. It was a social media cold call. And he got right back to me, and we just started chatting and just started shooting the shit. And then I was working on a solo album at around that time, late 16, early 17. And I invited him to play on it. And so that was a really fun collaboration that we did together. And, you know, we've just become really good friends over the years. And there was one moment I was hanging out in New York. I think it was during it was either a Pearl Jam tour or Temple of the Dog tour. I can't remember. But he came over to the hotel I was staying at, and he played me Bowie's demos he played me the Black Star demo that Bowie did.
Wow.
Bowie, I guess he just like did a, you know, finger tap drum machine part in his bedroom or something. And so that's the beat that Mark played on Black Star. And it's just like, whoa.
Cool.
it was a nice, I was blown away. But yeah, Mark is a really excellent example of kind of that, you know, that new generation of drummers that has like just incredible taste and incredible skills and can play friggin' anything. He just did a really cool performance with St. Vincent on Saturday Night Live, you know, because Mark can play like whatever the hell he wants to play.
Yeah, that's true.
So, you know, and I saw that you had Alon Rubin on as well. And he's another incredible, like, you know, guy that's able to like do all the technology, like he gets all the technology stuff, like, and but he's also able to like, you know, translate that into the acoustic set as well. So there's just all these really interesting, you know, like I think this generation of drummers is like, you know, just like the chops are incredible and the musicality is incredible. And in a lot of cases, like they're, you know, like they're really excellent musicians too. Like the two guys I just mentioned.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you know, like there's always so much to learn as a musician, and it's really cool to just to see a lot of these young players. For me, you know, it's a huge inspiration.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that just thinking about that whole like electronic sound and making it acoustic, I think that's a really interesting observation on kind of like where music has come from and gone and arrived at, because, you know, growing up listening to 70s music, you know, acoustic music recorded to tape, and kind of recreating that and feeling that, I think there's a whole generation of musicians who grew up with a lot more electronics, obviously,
for sure,
in the music, right? And
for
now
sure.
they're recreating those electronic sounds acoustically, also using some electronics. But to me, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Like, you know, Tame Impala is a really good example of, you know, that type of thing where, you know, like there's definitely like an acoustic drum part going on, but it's triggering all these fucking amazing sounds, you know? So yeah, it's an interesting cross section right now, of the technology, like going full speed. And, you know, a lot of these musicians are able to tap into it and make it still have it be like emotive. You know, I think that's the hard thing with electronics is making sure that there's the human element is still a part of it, because I think that's that's what listeners react to the most. I think is just, you know, you know, like hearing, you know, like Bob Dylan's voice, or you know, Jimi Hendrix's guitar, or, you know, Led Zeppelin playing in a room together. That's still for me, it's the pinnacle of, you know, musical expression. But it's really fun to use all the tools that are out right now. I've got I use Ableton Live, and, you know, it takes me a while because, you know, I'm an old guy and everything, but I've been using software for a long time now, and I think I'm getting better at it, and it's really fun to, you know, to make those leaps in with the technology that's out there right now. But
absolutely. Yeah. And
so
I think there's a warmth almost, like when I think about those musicians you just mentioned and playing in a room together, and that sound and that acoustic feel, like there's a warmth. And I think, you know, what you were saying about using electronics, but keeping that emotion and that warmth in it, I think is really important.
Yeah. And it's kind of hard to do. I mean, but when it's done right, it's just
magic,
as
right?
it's just as incredible. Yeah. Yeah.
I agree. Absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit about, I know we've kind of talked a lot about other musicians, but let's talk about you for a minute, because
do we have to?
We have to talk a little bit. We have to devote a little time to Matt Cameron. So
I'm such a bad self-promoter, but I'll do my best
for you. I got this. But besides being in incredible, iconic bands, you personally as a drummer have been really featured out there in the drumming world, and I just want to recognize that, because it's pretty amazing. You are part of these bands that have this name to them, but as an individual, you're just such a fantastic player. So
thank you.
And you were included, absolutely, you were included in the was it the Rolling Stone 100 lists of top drummers or something like that? I think it was.
Sure, why not?
Something like that. And
one of those lists.
You were in a list, but I do remember seeing that and just being like, yes, I always look at those lists with my own critical eye.
As do I. There's so many lists out there. But yeah, I think there was one who was like the 100 rock drummers or something like that, and they got it. I think I did look at it. I must admit.
You have to, yes.
But there was there were some drummers that were included that I really love, like Artiki Fullwood from Funkadelic. It's like thank you for mentioning him, because he's one of my all-time favorites.
Absolutely.
But yeah. I just love the fact that the records that I've been a part of have made an impact on other people's lives. It's like, I think for me, music has always been a continuum. The records that I grew up listening to, Hendrix and Zeppelin and then some of the punk, Ramones and Dinosaur Jr. and stuff like that. It's like they've been an influence for me, and I directed that into the music that I was making at the time. So I never envisioned that it would circle back to me with a younger generation. But I think for me, that's something I really feel great about, when I meet younger drummers and they say, oh man, you did this fill on Mind Riot that I charted out, and look at this. I charted it out and check it out. And I was like, huh? What? You did what? So
I love that.
That's money in the bank for me.
For sure. It doesn't get any better than that. I don't think.
Does not get any better. I've had the chance to meet some of my heroes, and I actually have been able to work with some of them on some music. And, once I got past the initial shock of being in a room with, Tony Iommi or Peter Frampton, or even Jimmy Page. It's just I guess my takeaway once I get past all the gushing is that we're fellow musicians. It's like we speak a language that that is universal, and a lot of people love music, and it hits this weird emotional spot the same way that looking at looking at a beautiful painting or something like that. It's like just to be a part of that language is an honor for me, for sure.
It's amazing. And I totally understand what you're talking about. And I think it's really, the language of music, it's really almost a physical thing too.
Totally.
I can just
totally.
Right. The feeling of hearing music that just touches you. You can get emotional about music. It can bring you back to moments in your life where you feel transformed back to a child, the feeling that you got. I listen to music a lot while I'm doing other things, and then I just had this experience of painting a room listening to music. And every time I go into that room, the music is there,
Cool.
And it's it just is. It is an amazing thing. And I think for musicians, I've had the same experience meeting someone. I mean,
Yeah.
meeting you, Matt, even, but meeting fellow musicians where you
Yeah.
immediately are like, okay, we're there's a language there, like
Yeah.
you said, there's something there. That's a connection that is pretty
Absolutely.
incredible.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
you that, like, meeting your heroes, your musical heroes, they are just as grateful to hear that from you as you are to hear that kind of thing from the young musician.
Yeah, I suppose. I always kind of make that really clear when I do meet some of these people, that have been a huge influence on me. And so once we get past that and when we start talking shop, it's just like, anyone else. But yeah, it's you're right though. There is sort of this sort of like gut physical thing that happens when, a certain piece of music is important to you as a listener, and it and it brings back these like just visceral memories of, when you first heard it. Like, I was cleaning up the kitchen this morning and I have on the local we have a really great radio station, KEXP, here in Seattle. It used to be KCMU. It was the college radio station from the University of Washington, and Kim Thiel was actually a DJ on that station,
wow.
as was Mark Arm. Anyways, that's a little sidebar. But On a Plane came on, like, Nirvana's On a Plane came on. It's just like, I just stopped everything and I turned it up, and it was just like, I remember the first time I heard that song. It's just like, yeah, just what you're describing is so true. And I just had to stop everything and just go, oh my God. I just had to take it in. It's like, what this, it just gets better and better with age,
Yeah.
So,
yes. All that music is so timeless.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, and I love that about music, being able to just have those memories associated, and like you mentioned, your first concerts that you went to, and that feeling of being in a group of people who had a similar, like, affinity for something. It's like nothing else. I can't wait to get back to that.
Yeah. Well, I remember back in those days in the 70s, like, people would bring firecrackers and M80s into the crowd. So like that's a big memory for me too. It's like all these explosions going off around me. It's
oh my
like,
goodness!
Oh my God, is this a war zone? It's like, I just had to kind of focus. Dennis Davis.
That's incredible. I hadn't heard of that before.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it could happen nowadays, but
no, those days are gone, thankfully.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a little distracting.
It's a lot to take in.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about what you were up to right now. Like I mentioned earlier, you have had all of these projects that have happened throughout the quarantine that you've had time to work on, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But getting back out there, what are you up to? What are you releasing? I know you have a bunch of things to talk about.
Well, the main thing right now is there's some Pearl Jam shows coming up at the end of September. And so we're really excited to just kind of start rehearsing. I mean, I definitely want to rehearse as much as possible. I feel I'm definitely a little rusty. It's like, I've been, working in my home studio, and I, write music and record demos and practice and everything, but it's different. It's a different sort of, muscle memory to get out there in front of a big crowd and play and everything. So, I'm starting to, I'm starting to kind of get back on the treadmill and just kind of get my physical stamina back where it needs to be. Cause I got a little flabby and
I think we all did. It's okay.
I got the COVID 2010 or, the 20 pounds or the 10 pounds, whatever. But I think it's, it also feels like, like everyone's making, like improvements and everyone's sort of like ready to just kind of start again. But, we have to be really careful, and the promoters are are, you know, trying to figure all that stuff out right now, like how it's going to work for indoor concerts. But we have some outdoor concerts, and you know, I'm still a little like, I haven't really been on a plane yet or been in a hotel or anything like that. So it's like, I think like mentally I'm still like just feeling a little hesitant to some degree.
Right.
And I think that's just part of like, you know, I'm kind of a homebody, and you know, I love just being at home and with my family and friends and stuff. But there was also this other element of like, you know, if you step outside, you're going to get COVID. So it took me a little while to kind of get out of that headspace. And I think I'm out of it now, which is really good. And I know I'm not alone in that kind of like, you know, feeling like, oh, how do I hang out with people at a party or
right. How do I be around people? Right.
So, I mean, I tended to kind of, I can definitely go inward in that sense, but I'm really excited just to move forward, just to take some steps and just kind of, you know, take some positive steps forward. And I think these shows are going to be really, really interesting. I'm really curious to see what the reaction is going to be. You know, I mean, it's only been a year. It doesn't seem like it's really been that long, in all honesty, but I know people have been sort of working up in their minds, like what it's going to be like, you know, what is it going to feel like to attend a concert, go to a restaurant, go to a party, etc. So, I think it'll be great no matter what.
Right. As soon as the music starts, I think the tension will fall away.
That's right.
It'll be okay. And then, you know, everyone's there together. I agree with you 100%. You know, months and months ago, it was hard to imagine ever being like in a venue, squished, you know, and sweating on each other, like that kind of thing. Yeah. I just couldn't ever imagine it happening again. And
isn't that weird?
Yes.
And that's a weird mindset to get into.
Right.
I think we were all in that for so long that we felt like, oh, okay, maybe this is how it's gonna be after a while.
Right.
It was just so everyone just felt so disconnected, and like everything felt so disorganized with Trump and everything. So it's just like, oh my God, is this what?
Yes, where are we going?
Like, where are we?
Yeah,
so you know, I feel like we're definitely past that.
Yes. I agree. I think, you know, it will be a little bit of a mindset switch, I think, to get back on planes and back around people. And I don't have any plans to travel until August, but I was just thinking about it today, you know, getting on a plane in August and how that will be. And, you know, traveling again for work, staying in hotels, thinking about things like the NAMM show, you know, even.
Yeah, so, we travel. I mean, our job is about getting out there and you know, so it's gonna be interesting. But it seems like every day, every week, it's getting more figured out. So
I agree, absolutely. Okay, so that's Pearl Jam, and you'll have some shows and
you know, but I've definitely been writing a ton of music, and you know, it's like I'm trying to figure out like what to do with everything I've been writing, but it's just been really fun just to kind of I tried to use my time. I really tried to, you know, use my time to just kind of focus in on kind of what I wanted to do, you know, musically, and just making sure my chops were still good. But like I said, it's a different sort of like, you know, muscle memory to get out there and perform. But but you know, I've been like the surviving Soundgarden guys, we're gonna do some music together, and we've been kind of like sending demos back and forth and things like that. So I'm really excited to do a record with those guys.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully more Taylor stuff. And just, you know, there's been a really cool project I did with Joe Wong. He's this he has a podcast called The Trap Set.
Yes.
And he's he's also he does soundtracks and scores for various Netflix and, you know, all the different streaming services right now, they're just like they're dying for like people to do scores and everything. So I would love to do some of that stuff as well.
Yeah.
But he's got a cool little band called Night Creatures, and we're gonna try to do some gigs together. So
Great.
yeah, so there's all kinds of fun stuff to do.
Things are happening, right?
Yes.
That's the good part. And you mentioned getting back on the treadmill. I think we had a conversation years back about running. Are you still an active runner? Is that you mentioned surfing and motocross, but
you know what, I'm getting back into it. I definitely like took some time off because I would go to a gym here locally, and everything shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting back on the treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, I'm doing
yes.
it. I'm doing it.
Me too, my friend.
Yeah. we all have to do that, right? Like
yes.
there's no stopping it. I mean,
no.
I feel best when I'm physically fit. I think it helps my mental state. It helps everything. So
absolutely.
So yeah, I feel like I'm making some good progress in that department.
That's
for an
fantastic.
old guy.
Oh, come on now. You could beat me in a race any day. I'm positive. Oh, well, thank you so much, Matt, for coming on.
Yeah,
it's been an absolute, oh my gosh, for me as well, just getting a chance to catch up with you and hear what you've been up to. Yeah. And hear some really great stories. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Right. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. And we will for sure catch up soon. I will see you on the road somewhere.
Yes, you will.
But for now, thank you and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in today. Join us each Tuesday for new episodes of Sarah Hagan Backstage.